So one of the things as a skill set that is important is to attempt to figure out where the thing that is most restricted is. So you have a hierarchy. The more you attempt to remember, the more complicated it gets. So if you're trying to remember 33 dysfunctions or restrictions, you're going to have a memory problem. If you try to remember a maximum of 3, you'll be in a decent position. When you figure this out as far as what you believe to be the most restricted, you can run a small experiment and figure out if that thing will affect the other things. So you have some choosing to do, some finding to do. This is why a relatively effective assessment that gets everything to move as quick as possible, and you figure the area to zoom in on is going to be useful. In the osteopathic profession, the term that people would use for finding what as many things as you can find and choosing the most restricted and treating just that would be key lesion. In the chiropractic profession, you will have some hole-in-one chiropractors where they believe that all restriction is always derived from the AA joint. So they only crack the top of the cervical column and then they figure everything's fixed. So there are people with this concept. So what you want to do is figure out how to figure this out. Then you can assess whether or not it worked the way you thought. Okay, bend to your left. And bend to your right. Well, that stinks. Okay? So that's all I need to know. Vertebral column, fine to the left, bad to the right. The lumbar region doesn't do much. We'll have you on your back. Hopefully the difference was visible on camera. If not, oh well. Everybody in the room believes me, right? Yes. Okay, sweet. My microphone might have picked some of that up. Those are okay. You didn't feel anything there? No. Resistance there, yep. But it'll go all the way up. Yep. So palpation has high value for resistance to motion, vision much more for asymmetry. Resistance there, yep. Go higher, yep. Right? So there's resistance in both hamstrings. So far, resistance to movement in both hamstrings, decent range. Right lumbar column, not doing much at all. The reason you want to go slow with shoulder girdles is because there can be some apprehension. That's okay. But as you do it, you've got to sort of go slow. Sometimes you can't just whip that around. It's all on the way down, you're very cautious. Right? See, like you just want to control it. Yeah. Right? Which is fine. And it moves great. So comparatively, you would say that the right shoulder, you felt a bit of restriction. That's fair. I'm not going to check the neck just because of how I have the table set up. So essentially what we'll say is right lumbar column, both hamstrings, right shoulder. Both hamstrings aren't bad. The right lumbar column is a mess. Fair? Okay, so what we want to do is try to choose a way to work on the right lumbar column to get the movement to happen that doesn't have a large amount of other stuff occurring. I don't want a lot of other tissues involved or a lot of other leverages involved on simple account of it's harder to believe what might happen. Okay, so we're going to have you lay facing that way. There you go. So I'm going to use as short a lever as I can. So the first thing that I could do is I could release the erector mass here. But what I really want to do is just simply use sort of a mixed leverage approach. I'm going to use the pelvis, but I'm not going to move the legs. I'm not going to wiggle the ribs around. I'm essentially just going to try to create a side bend here because that's the movement that's restricted. It's going to be a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's not going to be strict side bending because I would assume, oh no, that's not bad. Right, so that's okay. That doesn't feel like much to you. So you can see in here that the movement will happen. Hip approximates to the bottom of the rib cage. Good contact. I'm not pushing with my arm. Just hit, contact. Now, under certain circumstances, abdomen to the gluteal region, maybe not the most comfortable. You're okay with it, right? I could just get a little bit of space there, but in this case, I can get a good lean, right? That makes it feel like it goes farther. So if I try to really force that, there's a bit of resistance, right? Whereas if I just come into rotation a little bit, we get that to happen. Now, I'm not going to do any other activating force because it's inappropriate for the point. The point is to find out where the thing's the most restricted, do as little as possible to it, and attempt to get a diffuse effect. So the way that we would figure out if we got the diffuse effect is to go through the specific tests that we had a notation of some restriction in. Right? Yeah. So the nice thing about a lot of holding methods is that the person is going to breathe. So there's always an activating force that you can't get rid of. If you do get rid of breathing, you're not being nice. Right? Small chuckles, yay. And a smile from the patient. Or, sorry, client. I don't know which word people prefer anymore. Or who's going to yell at us. Right? Well, yeah, who cares? I mean, the people that yell at you care. Maybe you don't, but they do. They matter. It is, but they matter. Sorry, minor banter outside of the microphone. Right, now as I come back, what we do, hopefully that was visible to the people in the room. You see how far I came out? It didn't look like I went that far. Now I can meaningfully move farther in that. You'd agree? Yeah. Okay. I'll have you on your back. Now maybe this is a miracle, maybe it's not. Maybe it just makes everybody look like a goof. Right, so I don't need to check the rotations of the hip. I need to check where the resistance is. Right, so no matter how slow I move, resistance may be there. Yeah. Like a tiny bit of build there, but yeah, so it'll get to range without the resistance. So that's change, you agree? Right? So there's some resistance there, right? So that didn't change as much. So we got the right side to change more than the left side, right? That's pretty much free, right? It wasn't bad before, but it's different. So we'll have you sit up and face that way. So what we really need to see is whether or not the side bending changed. So just for the sake of comparison, so we have the visual reference point, bend left, and bend right. And that's different, right? It doesn't look fantastic. It's not like he's an accordion both ways, but with that one thing, we got the side bending to change, the minor restriction in the right shoulder to change. It wasn't big, so that's questionable as to whether or not it really changed or if it was really a problem. But we got at least a hamstring on the right side and the right low back to change, the right lumbar column. So sometimes when you find the big thing, you'll get the change, right? There you go.